Hi guys! Today's video is all about the basics and finding relaxation through art. It's a great exercise for anyone who doesn't know how to draw yet, or you don't feel real strong in your drawing skills because no drawing is required, but it's a great exercise to build out your skills and develop those things that are going to help you with your drawing in the future. This exercise is part of our course, which is called Your Artistic Journey, and it's a guide for self-taught artists who don't really know where to get started or what you should be working on. So if that sounds like you, go ahead and check that out. There's a link in the description box. Now let's go on over to the art studio and get started on some drawing. So I wanted to do a fun little, no pressure, just relaxing, enjoyable doodle drawing. And this isn't something I've ever really done before. I don't do too many doodle type drawings. The last one I did was for piece drawing, which was more of a graffiti art type drawing, but then I did incorporate some doodles for the backgrounds for fillers. So what I want to show you is how relaxing and simple and easy this can be. So this is a really good exercise or drawing to do if you're new and you feel intimidated by drawing. And a lot of the reason for feeling intimidated is that you're putting too much pressure on the end result, on the outcome of your drawing. So what I want to do today is just start filming me as I'm doing this drawing so you can see how I'm getting started. And I really want to emphasize that you don't need to put a lot of pressure on yourself because the end result doesn't really matter. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started on the drawing. And what I want to do is I like to start with some lettering because it gives you something to work from. And at the time of this recording, it is the end of September, so fall is just around the corner. So I'm going to start with the word fall. And I want it to be kind of in the center of my paper. It doesn't have to be even. It doesn't have to be in a certain spot. I do want to keep it so it's not too big because I want to leave some room to play around with some little doodles and stuff like that. So I'm doing this sort of sketchy, even though I'm calling this a doodle. And I guess technically it's not a doodle if you're sketching it out because by definitions, doodles are supposed to be something that comes more from your subconscious mind. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm doing a combination of uppercase and lowercase lettering, which is not my typical way of doing my lettering. So I'm just kind of playing around with the shapes. What I'm looking for is more the overall shape of the lettering. And again, they do not need to be perfect at all. There's no reason why anything needs to be perfect. I am also not going to erase any of this or make any corrections with it because I really want to just leave it as is and give it more of that non-perfect doodle type of feel to it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and outline this. So you really could just do your lettering with the marker and skip the pencil altogether. The reason I did the pencil first was because I know that a lot of people, if you're just starting out, you are not going to feel comfortable going straight in with a black marker on your drawing. Also, you absolutely do not have to use black. You can use whatever color you want. This is just the way that I tend to work. So it's habit for me. With this particular drawing, I'm not really trying to do too many different things as far as like my normal style of drawing. I am doing some things different because I don't want to just always be following the same exact things all the time. So I'm just cleaning up these pencil lines. So the rest of it I will probably just do with pens and markers. So this next one I'm going to use is, this is just a Sharpie pen. It's I think a medium. Yes, a medium. No, this is a fine point Sharpie pen. And I really like these. These do not smell like the regular Sharpie markers do. But then I'm just going to go in here and add these lines. I don't know what you would call them, just like little accent lines. Because the whole idea here with doing this doodle type drawing is, one of the things is that it's very low pressure. We're not doing anything crazy. We're not trying to do super cool drawings. We're just filling the page. And this is a little sketchbook that I have. And I really like it. It's got the nice bright white smooth paper, which I think if you're investing in a sketchbook, it's important to get a nice one. I have a bunch from when I was a teenager and probably a little younger than that, like probably junior high, high school. And it's those cheap ones that you get from like Target, or I got some of them even at the grocery store. And they have that real thin kind of textured yellowish paper, and they're horrible. They are not good. You can't erase on them. They don't take markers or anything very well. So these little bit nicer sketchbooks, like I said, they have a real smooth paper. They're a little bit heavier. They're a brighter white. Definitely worth investing in. And you don't have to do it in a sketchbook. I do a lot of my work on cardstock. And you can do, this is basically like a half sheet. So you could definitely do it on like a cardstock or something like that. So now these pencil lines are bothering me, so I'm going to try to get rid of those. So all I'm doing is I'm just adding to this. So the whole idea with the doodle is to pick a starting point and to just keep adding it. You don't have to do any lettering with it. Like I said earlier, I like doing the lettering because it gives you something to start with instead of just staring at a blank piece of paper, wondering what to do, what's that first mark going to be. It gives you something to work off of. And then also, if you want to follow a theme with your doodle, if you're having trouble coming up with something to do, then you could kind of follow this theme, and you could do like fall style doodles. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I think I know I want to put a border around this. What I'm trying to decide on is what color I want it to be, what color I want it to be, and how thick I want it to be. And since this is a doodle, which means we're trying to not put too much emphasis on the decisions we're making, we want to try to think a little bit less about what we're doing. Try to stay in frame here. With a doodle, you do want to put a little less thought into what you're doing than you would with a normal drawing. So those decisions, we do want to be much quicker. We don't want to labor over them too much, because then that's going to take away from this whole doodle vibe that we want to have. So this is, I guess, a little bit of a doodle hybrid, because I believe that the definition of a doodle is that it's supposed to be things that come from your subconscious mind. A doodle would be something like you're on the phone talking to somebody and there's a piece of paper in front of you and you're making these little scribbles all over it and you're not even realizing really what you're doing. So I'm just indenting that a little bit because I don't want to make this go in between the letters. I think that's going to separate them, and I don't want them to be separated. Now from here, I could fill the inside of this in with the color. I can go back in and do that later. I probably couldn't go in and do it now, but you could have gone in and added an even thicker border around that. So you want to just keep looking at your drawing and ask yourself what you can do next. What's the next thing? So we're going to keep working on this. We're going to put some different drawings in the background, but they're going to be just quick, simple line drawings with maybe some color added to them. We're not going to get too crazy. We want to keep it as simple as possible, and we want it to be super relaxing, enjoyable, and not a lot of pressure and emphasis on the final outcome of what the drawing's going to look like. We're just going to keep piecing it out little bits at a time, and it'll end up being whatever it's going to end up looking like. All right, so we got the letter done. We have this little border around it, a little halo or aura or whatever you want to call it. So the next thing is to start filling in the background. And I was thinking about adding some little images, some little doodles of leaves or pumpkins or something since it's fall. But I like this contrast between the black and the pink. And if I start adding in those little doodles, I feel like it's going to pull away from that. Or I could do my leaves and some pumpkins with purple, or with this pink color if I wanted to. That would be okay. I might add a little pink inside of there, but I like the combination of this black and pink, so I'm sort of leaning towards keeping it just those two colors. So I'm going to think a little bit on what I want to do as far as if I want to add some little pictures in there. But I'm kind of leaning towards just doing some simple patterns, just because they're really relaxing and they're easy. Anybody can do them. It doesn't take any type of drawing abilities at all. And also, practicing drawing the patterns is a really good way to develop your hand-eye coordination. It helps build your steadiness and confidence with your lines. So there's a lot of good benefits and skill development that happens simply by drawing the patterns, and it's so easy to do it that you don't need any type of special skills developed or anything like that. So I think for this one, I might just keep it simple patterns. At the very least, that's what I'm going to start with, I think. So I added the black around the edges because I want to divide up the background with some lines. And there's going to be quite a bit of black in the background, so I'm thinking having the black around the outside is going to look more natural than bringing it off of the pink. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start dividing this up. And I'm not doing it in any deliberate type of way. I'm just taking some lines and I'm drawing them uneven. So then the next thing I'm going to do is fill in this background with some type of pattern. And there's so many different things you can do. If you go on the internet and just Google patterns, or sometimes they're referred to as tangles, that's what they call them in the Zentangle world. If you're familiar with Zentangles, they call them patterns, or I'm sorry, they call them tangles, which just refers to the patterns that are used in that type of drawing. This one with the circles or bubbles or whatever you want to call them, for whatever reason, I find this one to be super relaxing. I like the contrast between the black and white. And all you do is make different size circles. And then I like to fill in that negative space in between with black. And you can have different sized areas of black. You can keep it mostly white with the bubbles and then have very little black, or you could leave more space and have more black. There's no right or wrong. Either one is fine. They're going to give you a little bit different look. You could want it to be a little more balanced and sort of have even amounts of black and white. Another thing you could do with this, if you wanted to really push your skills, and I don't know, I've never tried it, I don't know how hard it would be to get the effect I'm thinking of, but you could try to do kind of a transition, like a gradation of value with the lights and the darks. If you started out with more black here and faded into more white. I said, I don't know. I've never really thought about doing that before. That just popped into my head, but I don't know if it would even work. Maybe. These are the things that come up in my head when I'm working on my artwork, especially when you're doing something that doesn't take any mental capacity, like just drawing these circles. You don't have to think about them, you're just going along. It allows your brain to wander and start thinking about random things. So all I'm doing is just filling that in with those circles. And you'll see there'll be some gaps where it didn't fill in all the way. There's some white showing through the black, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. If it bothers you, you can go back and touch it up a little bit. So when you do this and you're dividing up your different sections, you could have them all radiating out from the center, and that would kind of make your focal point be your lettering. You could do them just random, every which way. Again, there's no right or wrong to doing this. Each one is going to give you a little bit different effect of your drawing. It's going to change where the focal point's at. So if you want there to be a lot of emphasis on your lettering, on this word, then you would want all your lines radiating out from it, and that will draw the viewer's eye into that word. Also, if that was my purpose for doing this, if that was one of the goals that I wanted to have, then I would probably leave the only color in the word, and then everything else would just be black and white, and that would also help draw attention to it because it's going to stand out from the rest of it. But with these doodles like this, those sorts of things usually, that's not the intention. The intention is just to do something. And the whole point of starting with the word in there is just to get rid of that blank page staring at you and to remove that level of intimidation. All right, so now we need to think about the next area to work on, or how we want to keep filling in the background. So here's a simple trick. You could add another section with the same pattern in it and repeat this pattern in different areas. One of the rules of composition and design, the rule of 3 was how it was taught to me, but it's really odd numbers. But the rule of 3 would be, if I'm going to repeat this element somewhere, then I should repeat it so it's in 3 places, or an odd number, so 3, 5, or 7. So if you did this one here and did another one over here and there was just 2, it will tend to pull your eye into it, and your eye isn't, it restricts your eye from being able to flow around the paper. And if we want to keep our focal point, this color, and that's why we use the color only in the middle, if we want to balance out how our eye travels, our eye, when this is done, if this is the only pink and everything black and white on the rest of it, our eye is going to get pulled into this pink area. If we wanted to balance that out and not have this a focal point, we would need to add some more pink elsewhere in the composition. But if we only added it in 2 places, our eye's going to want to bounce back and forth between those 2. If you do it in 3, then it allows your eyes to keep moving, and it'll keep following that path. And in effect, then it tends to see the other things around it. So it lets the eye travel more instead of being pulled to a specific area. So if we do this pattern here and do it in one more spot, the eye will tend to travel back and forth between those 2. So that's what the rule of 3 is. Doesn't mean that you have to follow it in your artwork. It doesn't mean that all things are going to be ruined if you don't do that. It's just one of those things they teach you in art school. And as they say, the rules are meant to be broken. And that applies for art as well. And that's often where the breakthroughs happen, are the people who sort of went against the grain and did their own thing. And, you know, that's where a lot of the famous artists stand out, like Vincent van Gogh did something completely different, and he was really considered a failure during his lifetime, and he didn't become well known, and he didn't stand out as an artist until after his death. But he did things that were completely different with the way he painted, and he did all his textures, and his techniques were not what was considered the standard at the time, but then was later recognized as being sort of a groundbreaking technique that he discovered for himself. But anyway, all that just to say that you should do what you want to do. You should experiment. I think it's a little more accepted these days I think we're used to people just kind of doing their own thing and not caring that there's rules. And it's good to know the rules, you know, or the elements of art and the principles of design. Like, those things are good to know and understand. It doesn't mean that you absolutely have to live by them. You're free to do your own things. But it's good to know and understand them, so when you're breaking the rules, you're doing it intentionally and not because you lack the understanding or the knowledge behind it. So you want your decisions that you're making with your art to be intentional, I guess is my point. With your doodle type drawings, yeah, we don't want to be as intentional, or we don't need to be as intentional. But for sure with some of your other art, if you're trying to make a nice piece, then you're going to want to be more intentional. And it's good to know, even with your doodles, it's good to know that rule of 3, that can be important to understand. Not that you necessarily have to follow that, 'cause maybe you want to do it differently and experience that for yourself to see if I do this or I do that, then how does it make the eye travel around the drawing? Or maybe you not even thinking about that. Maybe you don't care how the eye travels. You're just playing around with it. Nobody's going to see it. And that's perfectly fine too. Whatever your personal art journey is, don't let me or anybody else tell you that you're not on the right path. If it's the path you want to be on. I'm offering you this information strictly for anyone who wants it. Like I said, it's good to know. Maybe you've never heard about it before. I'm not saying you need to care or you need to follow it. I'm just putting it out there for anybody who does want to know. But you should follow your own path for your personal art journey and let it take you where you think it needs to go. So I'm just going to keep filling this in. And I think I'll go ahead and speed this up to finish it. Like I said before, you can go back in and fill in these spots that you missed if you want, or you don't have to. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this one up, and then I'm going to add a third one, and I'll probably put it over here somewhere. I don't know that it really matters, but I think I want to break up this big area white. The other thing is, by repeating the same pattern elsewhere, you start to fill up your background. And once you start getting it broken up into smaller chunks, it feels more manageable. So instead of, we went from looking at a complete white background with no idea of what we're going to do, to adding a couple of these. We add another one over here, and now we only have these smaller sections to deal with. And for myself personally, I start feeling more relaxed at this point. Once I know, okay, I'm putting a third one over here somewhere, and I look at these negative spaces I have left, I start to feel myself relaxing a little bit because it feels a lot more manageable to me. And that sense of intimidation or whatever you would want to call it, like that's starting to go away. I'm starting to relax a little bit. I don't feel as overwhelmed by trying to figure out what I'm going to do and is it going to look right and all those things our brain starts to do. So this repeating the pattern in 3 different places, I think that's a pretty good hack for just getting your mind managed a little bit so that you can relax and just kind of get in a flow state and go with it. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up. I'm going to do one more over here somewhere, and then I'll be back when that's finished. So I got the 3 different areas filled in here. And so now the next thing is to just keep working on filling up this background. And at this point, I have a couple of choices. I could continue making these sections like this and filling those in with different patterns, or I could just start filling in these bigger areas. Neither choice is really right or wrong. They'll give you a little bit different final result. This is a pretty big section, so if I just filled this in with one pattern here, one pattern here, one pattern there, which I could do that would be fine. That would give me a very different look than if I had more smaller sections and then filled those in. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working on this background. I'm just going to pick some different patterns and I'm going to group those in 3s to keep it consistent with what I've been doing. And I'm going to go ahead and just continue drawing, and we'll fast forward this through as we do that. So I got the little swirls filled in 3 areas. So I'm just going to keep working that same method of sectioning off 3 different areas of the drawing, filling it in with the same pattern. So now this one I'm going to do some straight lines. Mostly everything that's in here is kind of rounded out shape, so I want to do a different type of pattern that has lines. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. Well, there's actually multiple ways you can do it. The basic technique of it is the same, but then how you finish it or accent it can be different. So all you do is draw the kind of like these, I don't know what you'd call them, like ribbons going across. You just pick a spot and you draw them going from one end of your section to the other, or it would be off the paper. And you do not use a ruler. You just do the best you can. And then what you're going to do is they'll start to overlap. And you don't have to worry about making them the same thickness. And you do not want to stress out about them being perfect and straight and even, because they're not going to be. And especially if you have a section that's longer across, the more distance you go, the harder it's going to be to keep your lines straight. So you really want to make sure you avoid stressing out too much about it. That's really going to kill your sense of relaxation and how good you feel about what you're doing. So just let it be whatever it is. Obviously, you want to try to keep them straight and even and lined up, but unless you have a super, super steady hand and you don't hit any little bumps in the paper, then you're not going to be able to get them perfect anyway. So as you're doing it, just look for spots. And the way that you can have the variation in here is you can do where one side of the line, like the same side of the line for each one, would be thicker, so it adds a little more depth to it. You can do where you do a certain amount of these, and then for the background, maybe you do a different type of a pattern, or sometimes you could fill them in black. That's probably about the only, those are the common variations. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that, if you look at examples, that you'll typically see. So, or you can just leave it white, or you can fill it in, just keep filling in with these lines until your entire area is all filled up. That's another option. So it's easier, I find, if you do one line all the way across and then do the other side of it all the way across, instead of like trying to do one section, one section, one section. So that's basically, that's all there is to this. Like I said, there's different ways you can finish it up by doing different things in the background, or you could just fill it in with black. You could leave it white. You could keep filling in with these lines. And this is one of those things where repetition really comes in handy, because if you're doing just one drawing using something like, you know, this particular pattern, if you're only doing one drawing, then you only have one try to do whatever style of this you're going to do. Where if you did multiple drawings, you could try one with one style, do a different style with another one. And that's where you really start to learn what your style is and what you like and don't like. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this one up. And I'm going to add a couple more, and then I will be back when those are done. So now I want to show you what I did here. I filled in this pattern with the lines, and so it was in 3 different areas. And then I took the remainder of the white space that I had and I split it up so there were even amount of sections in a little bit smaller sizes, a size that felt better for this overall drawing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick, since I have 6 different sections here, I'm going to put 2 different patterns of, I'm going to continue with grouping them by 3s. So I'm going to pick 2 different patterns. I'm going to go ahead and fill those up off camera, and then I will be back to show you the finished product. Okay, so here is my finished fall pattern drawing. And as you can see, I stuck with the 3 sections, filling in the patterns. Another thing you can do, which you don't have to do this, but you can if you're trying to work on your compositions and your overall designs a little bit. What you can do is think about the overall value of the pattern. So if you look at this, this is much lighter than this is. So you could think about not putting 2 lighter valued patterns next to each other, and try to break it up a little bit with your darker ones. Like this one's a little darker, this a little darker. This is kind of a medium value one. This is a little bit lighter. This one's very light. So you can try to kind of break that up a little bit. One thing you do want to make sure, and not that it's super critical, but try not to get 2 sections side by side with the same pattern. Make sure there's at least one in between. But if you don't, if you happen to not be paying attention and they end up side by side, that's fine. It'll just be a bigger section with that pattern in it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you feel inspired to make some patterns of your own. And I will talk to you in the next video. Happy creating!